Welcome to Life Stories. What if the family that was supposed to love you the most was the very one that abandoned you? What if the sister who mocked you for being a failure was forced to watch as you rose higher than she ever imagined? This is the story of Emily Carter, a girl thrown away at 16 only to rise as one of the most powerful figures in tech. A journey of resilience, betrayal, and ultimate triumph. Subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's journey and witness how Emily turned pain into power. Turning 16 was supposed to be a milestone, a celebration of youth and possibility. Instead, it was the day my world collapsed. The rain pounded against the windows of our suburban house, its relentless rhythm mirroring the storm brewing inside me. I stood in the center of our living room, my backpack slung over my shoulder, as my mother delivered the verdict that would sever my life in two. "Emily," she began, her voice devoid of warmth, "we've decided it's time for you to leave." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. A joke, a misunderstanding, something, anything, that would turn this moment into a bad dream. But my father sat behind his newspaper, unmoving, unwilling to even look at me, and Madison, my perfect, polished older sister, leaned against the wall, her lips curling into a smirk. "You're not like Madison," my mother continued. "You're not college material. And we can't keep wasting resources on a lost cause." A lost cause. That was what they saw when they looked at me. Not a daughter. Not a person with dreams or potential. But a burden. A mistake. Madison stepped forward, the sharp click of her designer heels slicing through the silence. "Don't take it too hard, little sister," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Maybe you'll find work as a janitor. That seems more your speed." I gripped the straps of my backpack tighter, willing myself not to cry, not to break in front of them. The signs had been there all along: forgotten birthdays, the endless comparisons, the way Madison's achievements were celebrated while mine went unnoticed. But this was something I had never imagined. "You have until tonight to pack," my mother added, her tone as cold as the rain outside. "And don't take anything we bought. Those are family assets." I let out a bitter laugh, the sound foreign even to my own ears. "That won't be an issue. I've paid for everything I own since I was 12. Madison rolled her eyes. "Always the victim. Emily. This is why you'll never amount to anything." I wanted to say something, to hurl every ounce of anger and pain back at them. But what was the point? They had already decided my worth. Instead, I turned away, walking up the stairs to my room, though calling it that felt wrong now. It wasn't my room. It never had been. Just a space I had occupied until they were ready to be rid of me. I packed in silence, my hands moving automatically as I folded clothes into my battered duffel bag. There wasn't much to take. A few books, my laptop, some old photographs I wasn't sure why I kept. As I zipped the bag shut, a new thought took root in my mind, one that sent a slow fire through my veins. I would prove them wrong. Not just wrong, I would succeed so spectacularly that they would regret this moment for the rest of their lives. They would see my name in headlines and wonder how they ever doubted me. They would know, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that casting me aside was the biggest mistake they had ever made. But first, I needed a place to go. I knew exactly where to turn. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by the time I reached Mrs. Thompson's house. She had been my high school computer science teacher, the only person who had ever looked at me and seen something worth believing in. When I first started taking her class, she had noticed how quickly I picked things up, how I stayed late, hungry to learn more. She had quietly encouraged me, slipping me books on coding, finding free online courses I could take. And now, she was my only hope. The door opened before I even had a chance to knock. "Emily," she gasped, pulling me inside before I could say a word. Her warmth, her concern, was too much. The tears I had fought so hard to hold back spilled over. She didn't ask questions. She didn't make me explain. She just pulled me into a hug. holding me like I was something precious, something worth saving. "You're safe here," she murmured. For the first time in my life, I believed it. The first night at Mrs. Thompson's house felt unreal. Her home wasn't extravagant, just a modest, cozy space filled with the scent of freshly brewed tea and old books, but to me, it was a sanctuary. I curled up on the couch under a thick knitted blanket, feeling something I hadn't felt in years: warmth. Not just physical warmth, but the kind that comes from being wanted, from knowing that someone cares whether you wake up in the morning. Mrs. Thompson and her husband, David, didn't pry into details that night. They didn't ask me to relive what had happened, didn't force me to explain my pain. Instead, she simply said, "We'll figure things out in the morning." And for once, I believed that maybe, just maybe, things would be okay. The next day, I woke to the sound of quiet conversation. As I stepped into the kitchen, I saw David sipping coffee at the table while Mrs. Thompson prepared breakfast. The normalcy of it all made my chest tighten. My family never had breakfast together. Even when we did, it had always been a competition, Madison flaunting her latest achievements, my parents nodding in approval while I tried to make myself invisible. "Morning, Emily," David greeted, as if it were the most natural thing in the world for me to be standing in their kitchen. Mrs. Thompson turned to me with a warm smile. "I made some pancakes. Sit down. Eat." I hesitated for only a moment before slipping into a chair. The first bite was heaven. It had been a long time since I'd had a home-cooked meal, one that wasn't rushed or accompanied by snide remarks. "We've been talking," David said gently, setting his mug down. "You're welcome to stay here for as long as you need. But I know you're not the kind of person who wants charity." I nodded, swallowing hard. "I want to work. I need to find a way to." Mrs. Thompson cut me off before I could finish. "You've already been working, Emily. You've been learning to code. I saw your potential. And I know you're ready to take it further." My heart pounded. "But I don't have a degree. No company is going to hire someone like me." David leaned forward, his expression serious. "That's not entirely true. I work in tech recruitment, and I've seen people make it without a formal education, especially people with your drive. If you're willing to put in the work, I can help you get an internship." An internship. A real opportunity. I had spent the last year teaching myself programming in secret, using every spare dollar I earned at the cafe to pay for online courses. I had built small projects, experimented with different languages, even contributed to open-source platforms. But I had never thought it would lead to something real. I gripped my fork tightly. "You really think I can do this?" Mrs. Thompson reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I know you can." That day, everything changed. David helped me polish my portfolio, pulling strings to get me an interview with a small but growing tech firm. I poured myself into the opportunity, spending every waking moment refining my skills, preparing for the test assignments. I coded late into the night, sometimes barely sleeping, fueled by the need to prove to myself, to my family, to the world that I wasn't worthless. 2 weeks later, I walked into my first office job, heart racing but head held high. This was my new beginning. The first day at my internship was nerve-wracking. The office was sleek and modern, filled with the hum of quiet conversations and the rhythmic tapping of keyboards. I had never stepped into a corporate space before, and now, I was supposed to prove that I belonged here. The company, Horizon Tech, was a mid-sized startup specializing in educational software. They had taken a chance on me, an unknown, self-taught coder with no degree, thanks to David's recommendation. But once I walked through those glass doors, no connections could save me. It was up to me to prove that I deserved my seat at the table. My first task was small, fixing a bug in one of their e-learning applications. But to me, it was everything. I spent hours poring over the code, determined not just to complete the task, but to do it flawlessly. When I finally submitted my fix, My mentor, James Miller, a senior developer with kind eyes and a patient demeanor, gave me an approving nod. "Good work, Emily," he said. "You've got an eye for detail. Let's see what else you can do." Those words lit a fire in me. From that moment on, I treated the internship as if my life depended on it, because in many ways, it did. I arrived early, stayed late, and took on projects beyond my assigned tasks. I wasn't just here to learn, I was here to make myself indispensable. But it wasn't easy. There were nights when imposter syndrome crept in, whispering that I didn't belong, that any moment someone would realize I was just a girl who had been thrown away by her own family. There were moments when I stared at my screen for hours, unable to solve a problem, frustration burning behind my eyes. Yet every time doubt threatened to consume me, I remembered the night my mother told me I was a lost cause. I remembered Madison's smirk, the way she had sneered at me as if I would never be worth more than the dirt beneath her designer heels. I wouldn't let them be right. So I pushed harder. By the end of the internship, I had contributed to 3 major projects, rewritten parts of the company's codebase to improve efficiency, and even designed a small feature that earned praise from the CEO. When the program ended, I was offered a full-time junior developer position. I had done it. For the first time in my life, I wasn't surviving, I was thriving. With my first paycheck, I moved into a small apartment, a far cry from the cold, sterile house I had once called home. It was tiny, barely furnished. But it was mine. No one could take it from me. I framed my job offer letter and hung it by my desk. A daily reminder that I had built this life with my own hands. But I wasn't done yet. I wanted more, not just for myself, but for others like me. Kids who had been cast aside, told they weren't enough. I wanted to create something that would prove that success wasn't just for the privileged. And so, every night after work, I coded. I poured every ounce of my energy into building something new, something meaningful. I had no idea that what I was working on would change everything. As I stood in the towering glass office of TechCore, looking out at the city that once seemed so far beyond my reach, I felt something I hadn't in years: peace. The road that had begun the night my parents abandoned me had led me here, not just to success, but to something far greater. The Carter Foundation for Youth Empowerment was now more than just an idea, it was a reality. Every day, young people who had been told they weren't enough walked through its doors, finding the support and opportunities one had once fought for alone. They wouldn't have to struggle the way I did. They wouldn't have to prove their worth to people who never saw them in the first place. Madison's life had changed too. She was no longer the golden child, no longer cushioned by wealth and privilege. She had been forced to start over, to work for what she had. And though she had never outright apologized, I knew she understood now. She knew what it meant to fight for survival. As for my parents, they faded into the background of my life, ghosts of a past I had long since outgrown. They had lost the power to define me, to hurt me. And that, more than anything, was my real victory. Because success was never about proving them wrong. It was about proving to myself that I was always enough. I turned from the window, ready to step into my next chapter. My story wasn't just about revenge. It was about resilience. It was about rewriting the future. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories for more incredible journeys of triumph and transformation.